Night after night, the jungles of Vietnam echoed with ghostly wails, agonized voices meant to shatter the nerves of hardened Viet Cong. This was no legend. It was Operation Wandering Soul, an official United States campaign from 1968, masterminded by psychological warfare units who believed sound alone could break an army. But if exploiting sacred beliefs in the dead could turn the tide of war, what truly happened when faith collided with battlefield desperation? The answers begin with, who dared order the haunting to start? Orders for Operation Wandering Soul did not originate from rumor or improvisation. The campaign's authority is found in the archives, beginning with the activation of the 6th Psychological Operations Battalion in November 1965. This unit was assigned under Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, J3 Operations, and later J5 Plans and Policy, and it became the primary engine for psychological warfare in Vietnam. Their organizational history, filed on November 15, 1965, documents the battalion's mandate to produce and deliver psychological operations materials, including the very broadcast that would later haunt the jungle nights. The formal green light for the ghost broadcast appeared in a mission order dated March 12, 1968. This directive, preserved in the Military Assistance Command Vietnam J5 Psychological Operations files, specifically authorized Operation Wandering Soul as a coordinated audio campaign. The 6th Psychological Operations Battalion was named as the lead executor, with operational details outlining the use of pre-recorded tapes and loudspeaker broadcasts targeting enemy positions. The order's language is precise, leaving no doubt about the intent to exploit local beliefs for strategic advantage. It also established a clear chain of responsibility, from Military Assistance Command, Vietnam headquarters down to the battalion's command staff, whose names appear once in the operational roster before fading into the background of daily orders and field reports. Support from the Navy beach jumper units was secured a month later through a tasking message issued by U.S. Navy Task Force 115 on April 15, 1968. This message, filed under the Chief of Naval Operations, directed beach jumper teams to assist with coastal and riverine broadcasts, ensuring that the operation's reach extended beyond inland provinces to the waterways and deltas where Viet Cong units moved under cover of darkness. Each of these documents, activation memos, mission orders, and tasking messages, carry archival citations and official seals. They confirm that Operation Wandering Soul was not a collection of isolated pranks or field improvisations. Instead, it was a scheduled, repeatable mission, with accountability running from Military Assistance Command, Vietnam headquarters through battalion staff, and down to the teams who carried the tapes and operated the speakers. The paper trail locks responsibility to specific units and dates, anchoring the operation in the official record of the war. Operation Wandering Soul's broadcasts were not confined to a single battlefield or a narrow front. The campaign unfolded across a patchwork of contested provinces, each chosen for its strategic value and the density of enemy forces. In Binh Dinh, a coastal province laced with rice paddies and dense hamlets, the tapes echoed through valleys where North Vietnamese army units moved supplies under cover of darkness. Quang Tri, perched near the demilitarized zone, saw broadcasts aimed at infiltration corridors used by both Viet Cong and regular army troops slipping south from North Vietnam. The A Shao Valley, a remote stretch carved between steep jungle ridges, became another focal point. Here, the tapes followed the Ho Chi Minh Trail's shadowy arteries, targeting units that depended on secrecy and the cover of night. Further south, the labyrinth of the Cu Chi tunnels presented a unique challenge. This underground network, stretching for over 120 miles, sheltered entire regiments beneath the surface. U.S. loudspeaker teams positioned themselves near tunnel entrances, letting the ghostly recordings seep into the earth, hoping the sounds would travel through the narrow corridors and unsettle those hiding below. Along the waterways of the Mekong Delta, Navy beach jumper units broadcast from patrol boats, carrying the voices of the dead across rivers and flooded fields, where Viet Cong units launched nighttime raids. The selection of these operational zones was anything but random. Each location represented a critical node in the enemy's logistics and command structure. The campaign's stated mission, as recorded in MACV psychological operations files, was to multiply the fear in the heart of the enemy, to weaken his morale, and to encourage desertion by exploiting his deepest beliefs. Broadcasts were timed for maximum effect after moonrise, when the jungle was at its darkest, and when patrols were most likely to be huddled in silence, listening for danger. The intent was clear: to reach not just the ears, but the inner convictions of those who heard the tapes. Maps from the period show a wide distribution of broadcast points, from the demilitarized zone down to the Mekong. Each pin on those maps corresponds to a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead were deliberately blurred. The operation's reach, measured in miles of jungle, river, and tunnel, set the stage for a campaign that would target not only the enemy's positions, but the spiritual landscape that shaped their fears. Long before the first loudspeaker ever echoed through the Vietnamese jungle, the meaning of a wandering soul was already woven into daily life. In villages across the countryside, the fate of the dead was a question that shaped rituals, decisions, and even the rhythm of war. The Vietnamese term Linh Hon Lang Thang describes a spirit left to roam, cut off from peace because death came far from home or without proper rites. This belief is not a superstition on the margins. It reaches into every family, every ancestor altar, every festival of the dead. Wandering soul Dr. Lien Hang Thi Nguyen, a historian of the Vietnam War, explains that the Vietnamese belief in wandering souls is not just superstition, it is a deeply held cultural and spiritual conviction. For soldiers far from home, the fear of dying without proper rites was a real psychological burden. In this worldview, a person who falls in battle, whose body is never returned or honored by family, faces a restless afterlife. The soul is condemned to wander, unable to find peace, calling out for home for descendants who might one day remember and offer prayers. Ancestral rites are not a formality. They are a duty passed down through generations. Families tend graves, burn incense, and offer food to maintain a bond with those who came before. The living are responsible for the dead, and the dead in turn protect the living. When this chain is broken, when a body is lost in the jungle or a soldier disappears without a trace, the consequences are spiritual as much as personal. Ancestral rites. A former Viet Cong fighter recorded in an oral history at the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson Vietnam Archive said simply that if you die in the jungle, your soul will never find peace. It will wander forever, crying for home. This fear was not limited to one region or one generation. It echoed through Buddhist, Confucian, and folk traditions, reinforced by stories told at night and the rituals performed at gravesides. The U.S. Psychological Operations Team studied these beliefs with care. Every element of the ghost broadcasts, the wailing, the pleas to come home, the sound of a daughter calling for her father, was designed to strike at this fear. The message was always clear: die here, and you will become a Linh Hon Lang Thang. There will be no rest, no reunion, no honor. For men fighting far from their ancestral land, This was more than a threat. It was a vision of eternal loss, one that could undermine courage, even when bullets could not. Ghost broadcasts. The spiritual landscape shaped the battlefield as surely as the rivers and mountains. The tapes were not just noise in the night. They were crafted to speak in the language of ancestral duty and spiritual consequence, exploiting a belief system that gave meaning to both life and death. Understanding this is essential to grasping why the ghost voices, artificial as they were, could cut so deep. The next step in the campaign would be technical, but its power always began in the realm of belief. Inside a Saigon sound studio, in the months before February 1970, the team behind Operation Wandering Soul began work on a recording unlike anything used in war before. Engineers and cultural advisors gathered scripts, field notes, and fragments of Vietnamese funerary chants. Their goal was to transform these raw materials into a weapon that spoke directly to the fears of those fighting in the jungle. The centerpiece of their effort became known as Ghost Tape Number 10. Production started with South Vietnamese voice actors, chosen for their authentic accents and familiarity with the rhythms of local speech. Translators and cultural consultants worked beside them, revising lines to ensure every plea and lament would sound genuine to Vietnamese ears. The script called for more than just words. It demanded the voices of the dead, the cries of children, and the wails of mothers left behind. Every phrase was tested for emotional weight, every intonation measured against the traditions they aimed to exploit. To create the illusion of a spirit world, engineers turned to the studio's echo chamber. Voices were recorded, then played back through halls of reverb, their edges blurred until they seemed to float in the air. Buddhist funeral music provided a mournful backdrop, layered with the clang of gongs and the distant howl of a tiger, a sound sourced from the Bangkok Zoo and spliced into the mix to evoke the threat of the jungle itself. Sobs and whispers were added in overlapping waves, building a soundscape that was both familiar and otherworldly. The final tape was a college. A young girl's voice called out for her father. Men spoke as if from beyond the grave, warning their comrades to turn back or risk eternal wandering. Each element was selected to resonate with beliefs about the afterlife, the fate of the unburied, and the duties of the living to the dead. The recording was transferred to analog reel-to-reel tapes. Each one checked for clarity and emotional punch before being cleared for use in the field. Delivery logistics were as carefully engineered as the tape itself. Copies were loaded onto helicopters, usually Hueys equipped with powerful loudspeakers. At night, crews would fly low over enemy positions, broadcasting the ghostly sounds into the darkness. Trucks with mounted speakers patrolled roads and village edges, while Navy beach jumper units carried the tapes along rivers and canals, letting the voices drift across water and through dense foliage. In some areas, leaflets echoed the audio message, reinforcing the threat of spiritual unrest. The tapes were designed for maximum reach, but also for secrecy. Field teams often destroyed used copies to prevent capture or reuse by enemy forces. Ghost Tape Number 10 became the campaign's signature artifact, a product of technical skill and cultural research. The process from script writing and voice casting to sound mixing and field deployment demonstrated a calculated effort to turn belief into vulnerability. The tape itself, a simple reel of magnetic tape, carried the weight of centuries-old fears, repackaged as a tool of modern psychological warfare. Raymond Dietsch, commander of the 6th Psychological Operations Battalion, kept a field log of reactions from every side. His entry for March 18, 1969 describes a night near Quang Tri when the tapes rolled over the tree line. He wrote that they were told not to play them near Army of the Republic of Vietnam units. The South Vietnamese soldiers were just as likely as the enemy to be shaken. He also noted that even his own men, who understood every technical detail behind the operation, sometimes felt uneasy hearing the voices drift through the darkness. A Marine with the 3rd Battalion, who stood watch during one of the broadcasts, recalled the effect in blunt terms. He said they knew it was a trick. Still, when the wailing started, everyone went quiet. You could feel the hair on your neck stand up. Sometimes the enemy would spray bullets into the jungle, hoping to silence the voices. Other times, it was just dead quiet, like the whole world was holding its breath. Nguyen Van Than, a former Viet Cong fighter, described the experience from the other side of the line. He said the first time he heard the voices, he thought the spirits of their dead had come back. The men were afraid. Some wanted to leave the area. Others said it was just the Americans trying to trick them. But he saw men refuse to go on patrol, saying the jungle was haunted now. Le Thi Mai, a rice farmer from Binh Dinh province, remembered how the broadcast seeped into civilian life. The sounds would come at night, sometimes from the river, sometimes from the fields. She remembered her mother telling them not to go outside after dark. People said the ghosts of the dead soldiers were wandering, calling for their families. Even the old men who did not believe in such things stayed indoors. Not every reaction was fear. Some Viet Cong units, tipped off by their political officers, recognized the tactic as American propaganda. Field reports note that in several cases, fighters fired at the speakers or helicopters, shouting curses into the night. But the confusion and unease lingered. The boundaries between trickery, belief, and real loss blurred in the humid dark, leaving soldiers and civilians alike to wonder what was real and what was just another weapon in a war that reached far beyond the battlefield. Doubts about Operation Wandering Soul's morality surfaced long before the last tape faded into the jungle. Chaplains attached to U.S. units voiced quiet concern, questioning whether it was right to weaponize the deepest fears of another culture. Legal advisors reviewing field reports and after-action memos found no violation of the Geneva Conventions. Psychological warfare was not explicitly banned, yet the absence of a clear prohibition did little to settle the discomfort. Historian David Kennedy, reflecting on the campaign decades later, described a gray area where legality and morality drift apart. He noted that while no international law specifically forbade targeting enemy beliefs, the operation's intent, using spiritual dread as a tool, posed a challenge to conventional ideas of military honor. Kennedy observed that exploiting sacred traditions to induce fear may be effective, but it risks crossing a line into psychological cruelty. Some U.S. commanders defended the campaign as a non-lethal alternative to firepower, pointing to the lack of physical harm. Field manuals from the era encouraged targeting morale, but stopped short of discussing the ethics of cultural manipulation. Internal memoranda from MACV and JUSPAO, now declassified, reveal a pattern of unease. Debate over whether the tapes disrespected Vietnamese customs, whether they might backfire among South Vietnamese allies, and whether the psychological impact could be measured at all. Contemporary analysts in military psychological operations study Operation Wandering Soul as a case study in both innovation and ambiguity. The operation is cited in doctrine reviews not as a model to copy, but as a warning about the limits of cultural targeting. International humanitarian law, as interpreted by the ICRC, remain silent on such tactics, focusing instead on the protection of civilians and prohibition of terror. The question lingers. When does psychological warfare cross from strategy into harm? The record offers no clear answer, only a legacy of unresolved tension between what is legal, what is effective, and what is right. Today, militaries worldwide invest billions in psychological operations, proof that minds remain the ultimate battlefield. Digital propaganda now travels faster than any ghost tape, blurring the line between fear and fact. As technology evolves, so do the tactics. The question is no longer whether such strategies work, but what we risk losing each time we wage war on belief. Memory, after all, is a weapon that never sleeps.